Jesus is a king, but his kingdom does not belong to this world. What does that mean? What does that look like practically for Jesus to be the king and for his kingdom to not belong to this world? I'd like to share with you today part of the story, part of the history of our neighbors to the south. I'd like to share with you today part of the history of Mexico to illustrate what it means, or at least one aspect of what it means for Jesus to be king and for his kingdom to not belong to this world. In 1531, Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared to a regular guy, a poor man named Juan Diego, on his way to daily mass. And very, very quickly, all of Mexico, and really Central and South America, was converted to the faith. They became Christians, they became Catholics. There was a strength in their faith, and a fire in their faith, and a devotion in their faith through the intercession and the patronage of Our Lady of Guadalupe. About 400 years later, about 350 years later, Mexico got a president. His name was Benito Juarez in 1867. In 1867, Benito Juarez became the president of Mexico, and the first thing he did was he confiscated the Catholic Church in Mexico City. It was a church called St. Francis Church in Mexico City. And he turned it into a Masonic temple. 350 years after Our Lady of Guadalupe converted Mexico. But the problems only began there. But 40 years after that, in 1924, after some anti-Catholic presidents in Mexico, the worst one came. In 1924 was elected a man named Plutarco Elias Calles became president of Mexico in 1924. And Calles said, quote, "The Catholic Church is the unique cause of all of Mexico's misfortunes." Very soon, he created his own church called the Patriotic Church. Soon after that, the Catholic schools were outlawed and the property was stolen by the government. At the same time, secular schools were required. And in the secular schools, here we call them public schools, atheism was taught as an approved course in every school. Because if you indoctrinate the young, you change the course of history. Calles outlawed the Catholic schools. Homeschooling was illegal. So you went to the public schools where you were indoctrinated with atheism. In June of 1926, the Catholic Church was effectively outlawed in Mexico. Every Mexican in public office, whether you were the mayor, the chief of police, or like the dog catcher, whatever you did for the government, you had to take an oath to accept the anti-Catholic decrees of the Mexican government. If you didn't take the oath, you would go to prison if you were lucky, or you would go in front of the firing squad and be killed. If you wore clerical attire, if you dressed like a priest, or religious attire, if you dressed like a nun or like a friar, you would be fined 500 pesos, which I think is a lot of money. If you even questioned the laws, you were in prison for 5 years. In Spanish, if you know Spanish, you can tell me that to say good. How do you say goodbye in Spanish? Adios. It means like with God, or like go with God. It was illegal. If you told somebody adios, you were fined, or you would go to jail. The clergy were required to register with the state, If I were in Mexico in 1926 and I didn't go and register with the state, and then I came and said Mass, they would come and take me and kill me. It was a capital offense. On the books. They stole all the church property, religious were outlawed, foreign priests and nuns were sent home, and some Catholics were sent to concentration camps where they were killed by machine guns if they prayed. Less than 100 years ago, in North America. The people were obviously upset by this. And there was a man, he was a shopkeeper. He just had a little store, like a lot of people, have a little store. And a sign in the window of his store. And it said in Spanish, Viva Cristo Rey. Long live Christ the King. The police saw his sign, and so they took this old man and they beat him. Word spread. The people were already angry, and they began to use this as their rally cry, as their encouragement. Viva Cristo Rey. Long live Christ the King. There was a man named Valencia Guarardo. He was being tortured for being a Catholic. And he said, Viva Cristo Rey. So they cut out his tongue. Then he just pointed to heaven to confess his faith in God, because he was not going to give up the faith, because the secular government, influenced by the Masons, was coming and trying to take it from him. So they cut off his hand. And then finally they killed him by bludgeoning him with the butts of their rifles. Father Reyes was tortured for 3 days with fire and then was shot. Somehow he survived the initial shooting, and so he weakly, with all the strength that he had, yells out, Viva Cristo Rey! So they went up closer to him and shot him point blank. There was a priest at a church that they found, and he was there at the church, and so they cut off his hands so he couldn't say Mass. Viva Cristo Rey! There's another guy, his name was Antonio Ibarra. They tortured him like they were wont to do for being a Catholic, and then they hanged him. But before he died, he grabbed the rope, pulled himself up, and said, Viva Cristo Rey! And then he was killed by hanging. Long live Christ the King. The examples go on and on and on. There's a priest named Father Miguel Pro. He would disguise himself so that he could sneak around to people's houses to bring the sacraments. That's what he did. One time, he even disguised himself as a police officer and went into the police station where they were looking for him so that he could bring communion to the prisoners. Even there was one time where he was in the house. I think he might have been saying Mass. I don't remember what he was doing. And the police came, and so he ran, and he went to another house where he had a hideout, and he got into his police uniform, his inspector uniform, and he came back to the house where they were looking for him. And he said, y'all better find that priest. Otherwise, I'm going to report you to the superiors. And they left and kept looking for him. Eventually, he was captured and went in front of the firing squad. And he said, can I have a moment to pray before you kill me? So he got down on his knees. He prayed. And then he stood there with his rosary in one hand, his crucifix in another hand. Viva Cristo Rey. Long live Christ the King. And they shot him, and he died. There are many, many more stories. But here's the last one that I want to share with you today. There's a 14-year-old boy named Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio. He was captured for being Catholic. to ploy him to renounce his faith. He was made to watch as another Catholic was hanged. But that didn't work out too well for the secularist government, because Jose only encouraged the other man. He said, soon we will be together in heaven. He was 14. And on the evening of February 10th, 1928, they cut the bottoms of his feet and made him walk through town. As he was walking through town, they sliced at him with machetes, such that he was bleeding all over. And they said to him, if only you say, death to Christ the King, we'll stop. That's all you got to do. Just renounce Jesus. Death to Christ the King. And you know what he said? I will not give in. Viva Cristo Rey. Long live Christ the King. And Saint Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio was killed that day. He was martyred for his faith in Jesus Christ. What does it look like for Christ to be king, but for his kingdom to not be of this world? What it looks like for Christ to be king and for his kingdom to not be of this world is right here. What it looks like for Christ to be king and his kingdom to not be of this world is also right here. See, y'all, that's the cool thing about being a Christian. If we're really Christians, if we really live the Christian life, is that we can't lose. The only way we lose is if we sin. Say that again. The only way we lose is if we sin. They can beat us. They can torture us. We can even inflict wounds on ourselves. They can slice our feet, make us walk through town, and shoot us into a grave. They can make us see horrible things. They could put us on a cross. The only way we lose is if we sin. St. Paul says, nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. Neither death nor life, nor present things, nor future things. Things of this world. Nothing. Because God wins. Because the resurrection is real. That's how Christ is king. So what are the places in your life where Christ is not king? What are the places in your life where you're losing because you're sinning? There are places in my life. And how this week, how this Advent starts next Sunday, how can we give Jesus just a little bit more control of our lives? How can we sin just a little bit less and therefore win a little bit more? I'll be totally honest with y'all. Like, for me, this past week, like I've been just kind of blah, just kind of going through the motions in serving Jesus. And that's not good, and I don't like it. And so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. since I'm going on vacation, and since I have an easy vacation, I'm just going to stay with my parents, I'm just going to double my prayer this week. Instead of making one holy hour, I'm going to make 2. Because I've been kind of lazy. That's what I'm going to do this week. I don't expect you to double your prayer this week because you're not going on vacation. I do expect each of us to do something. What can we do? Perhaps it's actually having a conversation with somebody who's wise and whom you trust about your favorite sin. And maybe you can get some accountability, some help in fighting against it. Maybe it's adding a little bit of fasting into your life. Maybe it is doubling your prayer because you don't pray a whole lot and there's some time in your life where, yeah, if I pray 5 minutes a day, I can pray 10 minutes a day. Where can you give Christ just a little bit more control of your life? Because that can change the world. I want to say just one more thing this afternoon. Because I think I owe it to you to say it. I think that a lot of us, myself included, are disappointed and angry about what happened when the bishops of the United States got together last week. That being, well, not a whole lot about the grave sins and crimes that many of my brother priests have committed, that have come to light in the news. About the grave sins and crimes that Archbishop McCarrick committed when he was even a cardinal. It is upsetting to me, maybe it's upsetting to you, that the bishops had a plan to do something to try to help make things better, and the Vatican said, hey, hit pause on the plan, don't even talk about it, and wait till February. It is upsetting to me that the bishops at the end of their meeting had drafted a resolution or a letter or something like that to ask the Pope to, insofar as it was in accord with the law, to release what the Pope and the Vatican knows about what Archbishop McCarrick did and what he didn't do. So that we could just be honest and investigate this thing, and please God, help these kinds of crimes and sins from happening in the future. And that they said, no, we're not going to do that. All that is very upsetting to me. So what to do? What to do? 2 things. Number 1, I have no idea what happened. Like in Baltimore. I don't know why all this stuff happened. But I asked Father Mark about this, and he told me I could say this, that the bishop is going to talk about it. Maybe this week, maybe next week. Like, the bishop is going to record an audio or a video or something. Bishop Fobb is. Just to tell us about what happened. And as much as I want to be done with all of this, like, we need to be done with it the right way. And I look forward to hearing, like, what Bishop Fobb has to say. Because he's a good man, and I have a lot of hope that what Bishop Fobb says to us, I don't know what it is, but whatever he says to us will be helpful. So if you're interested, keep your eyes and your ears open for that. Number two, which is actually more important, and which is actually connected to what I've been talking about this whole past few minutes. Every time I go in the chapel and I'm upset, when I'm angry, when there are tears in my eyes, when I don't, Jesus, what is going on? Jesus always responds in the same way. This morning, he responded, when I went and prayed about this in the chapel, he responded the same way as he did last week, and the same way as he did the month before that, and the same way as he did when the Pennsylvania grand jury report came out and I was under treat. It's the same way every time. He just tells me, be a saint. Every time. That's how. What can I do, Jesus? Be a saint. What can I do, Jesus? Be a saint. What can I do, Jesus? Viva Cristo Rey. Long live Christ the King in me. Go make the extra holy hour every day this week. Go find some accountability with your sin. Go pray just a little bit more. Go do some fasting. Go, perhaps for you, maybe I haven't been in confession in a while. Come to confession on Friday. Go root out sin. Be more open to me, Jesus says. And be a saint. So we pray today on this solemnity of Christ the King, that through the intercession of all the saints in heaven, through the intercession especially of the martyrs of Mexico from just about 100 years ago, that Christ might truly be King in our lives and in our world, and that we might become saints.